Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. President Trump's legal team came out swinging. They did a fantastic job yesterday. They cut through Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler's remarks like a hot knife through butter. It was just amazing what they did. And they were saying the president did nothing wrong. But the Democrats, just like they did in the Kavanaugh hearings, have come up with a surprise witness. Suddenly, John Bolton is on the scene, and they are claiming that they have heard something about a book he's going to write. They haven't seen the book, but they want to claim, here's what's in it, and they say the president wanted a one-for-one deal. That's even not what their own story said. Their own story said he was talking about Russia, he was talking about corruption, talking about meddling in our elections, etc. But the headline said Trump asked Bolton to hold up Ukraine aid until he gets the Biden problem settled. That wasn't accurate, even according to their own sources. But that's the way the media is going to handle this thing, and Trump's under the gun. Well, Mark Martin has got more about what's happening.
President Trump's legal team said the commander-in-chief was acting under his constitutional and legal authority, adding that asking a foreign leader to get to the bottom of corruption is not breaking the law. The president's attorneys argue the Ukrainian natural gas company Burisma paid Hunter Biden millions of dollars to serve on its board, even though he had no experience in the industry.
Well, he did have one qualification. He was the son of the Vice President of the United States. He was the son of the man in charge of the Ukrainian portfolio for the prior administration.
As to charges the president used executive privilege to obstruct Congress?
Really? Is that the principle in the United States of America? That if you assert legal privileges or rights, that means you're guilty? That the innocent don't assert their rights? That the president can't defend the constitutional prerogatives of his office? That doesn't make any sense.
However, reports that former National Security Advisor John Bolton's upcoming book claims that the president said he wanted to hold up aid to Ukraine to pressure an investigation into the Bidens is cutting into the defense's case.
I haven't seen a manuscript, but I can tell you nothing was ever said to John Bolton, but I have not seen a manuscript.
Nothing in the Bolton revelations, even if true, would rise to the level of an abuse of power or an impeachable offense.
The allegation sent shockwaves and gave Democrats renewed energy to call for witnesses.
It boils down to one thing. We have a witness with first-hand evidence of the president's actions for which he is on trial.
Bolton said he would testify if subpoenaed by the Senate. Now even some Republican senators have come out saying let him speak.
It's pretty fair to say that John Bolton has a relevant testimony to provide to those of us who are sitting in impartial justice.
Some warn that will mean more witnesses and a longer trial. Senator Lindsey Graham tweeting, if there is a desire and decision by the Senate to call Democratic witnesses, then at a minimum the Senate should allow the president to call all relevant witnesses he has requested. There are reports that GOP leaders are receptive to a suggestion by Republican Senator Pat Toomey to allow one prosecution witness for one defense witness. The question on witnesses could be decided later this week. The president's legal team is expected to wrap up opening arguments today. Mark Martin, CBN News.
I want to show you now the actual text in the New York Times of what they said that was in the book. In his August 2019 discussion with Mr. Bolton, the president appeared focused on the theory Mr. Giuliani had shared with him, that Mr. Bolton's question that he preferred sending no assistance to Ukraine until officials had turned over all materials they had about the Russia investigation that related to Mr. Biden and supported of Mrs. Clinton in Ukraine. Now, that's a totally different thing from the headline the New York Times put out and what was picked up today in the Wall Street Journal if it was a fact. He and Bolton didn't talk about that as it was initially showed. And that's what was said in the press release. But the headline said, President ties meeting with Ukraine aid to investigation of Biden's. The thing was wrong. They just lied. And that's what's happening so often in this particular case. But I want to congratulate Jay and his team. They were just fantastic. And Pam Bondi, who was, I guess, the Attorney General in Florida, who did a masterful job of pointing out Burisma and how corrupt that company was. And Hunter Biden was sitting there getting, I think, $50,000 a month as a member of the board, which is just unprecedented. Well, CBN chief political analyst David Brody is here to talk impeachment and politics. And David, what are you hearing about the White House on John Bolton's claim about this thing, the so-called bombshell?
Well, there are lots to report. Just this morning, Pat, a senior administration official saying that John Bolton, and these are the words of the senior administration official, not mine, that John Bolton is a world-class jerk. That from a senior administration official to me this morning. They talk about how he had a lot of policy differences with the president. He was persona non grata in the White House. And this White House official, or I should say administration official, goes on to tell me that, look, even if any of this did come up in conversation, that's the president's prerogative. It is public policy discussion. It's okay to discuss it, and that does not rise to the level of being an impeachable offense. So that's the line from the White House. And, of course, we heard that from Alan Dershowitz as well yesterday. Well,
how is this going to affect the impeachment trial in terms of witnesses?
Well, Pat, that's a great question. As we like to say here in Washington, and I think ever since Donald Trump became president, it's fluid. That's pretty much the way it is now. Look, I think you've got Susan Collins and Mitt Romney. Those are two Republicans that look to at least think they're going to probably go for more witnesses. They want to see more witnesses, but they're going to need 4. Democrats are going to need 4 Republicans. That's 2. You got Lisa Murkowski, potentially Cory Gardner as well. That might be a couple others. We'll see. But this is a very fluid situation right now. And I have to tell you, Pat, it is interesting to note that what you said at the top of the broadcast about this New York Times article is really, really troubling. I think you nailed it right on the head there, that the headline did not have anything to do with actually what the article reported. And as a matter of fact, the article never reports at all from the book. There are no quotes from the book at all. And what's really interesting, maybe most damning of all here, Pat, is that in the article itself, the New York Times article, the prestigious, air quote, New York Times, says that multiple people told them this. Well, hold on for a second. Let's unpack multiple people. That sounds to me that, who's that? The guy at the local deli? I mean, the point is that at some point, readers need to know who these multiple people are, because let's face it, we all know people, sources have an agenda, and a reader must know where that person, him or her, are coming from. So I think that's a big part of this, Pat.
Well, you know, it's echoes of the Kavanaugh hearings. They held a surprise witness that came out and alleged that Kavanaugh was engaged in all these sexual misconducts. And, you know, it just damaged the poor man for the rest of his life, but he still got confirmed.
Well, and now we find out whether or not this is going to be Brett Kavanaugh Part 2 when it comes to the Republican Party sticking together. Brett Kavanaugh, when all of that happened, Republicans said enough. They got upset. They banded together, and that was it. They shut the Democrats down. They had Trump to lead them through it, who said, I'm not going to throw Kavanaugh under the bus through all of this. The question then becomes, in the Senate, what will McConnell do? Will McConnell be able to stay strong? But look, the reality is this. If he's got 4 Republicans that are willing to jump ship, and we're about to find out on witnesses, then McConnell and Schumer at that point, Pat, would go into deal-making mode. In other words, if there are going to be 4 Republicans that are going to vote with Democrats to call Bolton as a witness, then McConnell's going to say, all right, well, what am I going to get out of it? Am I going to get a Hunter Biden? Am I going to get a Joe Biden? Who am I going to get out of it? And I think that's where the deal-making goes down. And then Democrats, Pat, are forced with a decision. Okay, you want John Bolton? Great, knock yourself out. But you're also, at that point, do you really want to hear from Hunter Biden in front of a national television audience? Because let's face it, Hunter Biden on the stand you would think, in theory, bolster the Trump argument that there was indeed corruption, or at least the appearance of corruption going on, is the case they'll make, and that could obviously help Trump and hurt Democrats.
What's the final arguments going to be? It looks like Trump's already started setting up, it's going to be socialism versus capitalism, and Bernie Sanders is the leader. Joe Biden, you know, I really like him. He's a likable sort of guy, but He's done some strange things, and I went to New Hampshire with him the same day on the same plane. He was going Democrat and I was going Republican, but he plagiarized Neil Kinnock, and now he's gotten into this problem with Hunter. I don't think he can survive this, do you?
Well, Joe Biden has had a lot of problems right from the very get-go. And honestly, Pat, it's all started with his announcement when he wanted to become president. I mean, what was his reason for running? Well, cue the crickets, because what's the reason? To stop Trump. I mean, that's the uplifting message, to stop Trump. And so it's been a problem for him. And look, Bernie Sanders is poised to potentially win Iowa and New Hampshire. And if that happens, watch out, the train to Leningrad, which a lot of folks might think, look it up, millennials and the Gen Zers, but the train to Leningrad may be moving out towards Russia if Bernie gets there. I mean, it wouldn't be Make America Great Again. It could be Make America Red Again. I mean, that's potentially what we're seeing here, and that would give Democrats fits.
David, thank you so much. My guess, by the way, brother, is that Trump's going to survive this. This impeachment thing is a joke, and it's going to be over pretty soon. And, you know,
well, they were sure happy when they were handing out the impeachment pens.
Oh, yeah. It was a big celebration. As somebody said, you're supposed to be solemnity. You're going to overturn an election. Well, in other news, what is called the deal of the century is what President Trump is calling his Middle East peace plan. The question, can he get the deal done? John Jessup has that on CBN News Bureau.
Thanks, Pat. Ahead of his noon White House unveiling of the Middle East plan, the president and former businessman known for the art of the deal said this one is for the ages.
In the business world, when I was back in the business world, when the deal was tough, people would jokingly refer to it as this is tougher than Israel and the Palestinians getting together. And that's what I've heard all my life. And so we'll see what happens. We have something that makes a lot of sense for everybody.
Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz, who both praised the plan, but he did not meet with Palestinian leaders who have already rejected it. The plan reportedly lays out boundaries for an eventual Palestinian state, and it could have a major impact on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, Israel's upcoming national elections, and Israel's relationship with its Sunni Islamic Arab neighbors. Well, turning to the expanding coronavirus, the death toll in China has risen by 25, claiming the lives of at least 106 people, including the first death in the capital of Beijing. That comes as the United States is preparing to fly Americans out of the city of Wuhan tomorrow. They'll be screened at a stopover in Alaska. Also, the government is now screening arriving passengers at 20 airports. The number of confirmed U.S. cases remains at 5, with health officials testing for 110 potential cases in 26 states. And in a sign, there are fears about the outbreak affecting the economy. Big losses on Wall Street Monday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed down 454 points. The S&P and the NASDAQ also dropped. The three indexes, Pat, seeing the worst day since October.
Well, they're concerned that the Chinese economy will go in the tank because you can't shut down major industries of this nature and expect that economy to grow. You know, what we're facing with, ladies and gentlemen, is an enormous debt overhang in the overall economy of the world. America's unfunded and declared and unfunded obligation is something in the neighborhood of $70 to $80 trillion. Around the world, it's something close to $250 trillion. And if one of the big trading partners goes in the tank, then it's going to hurt everybody. So people who are trading stocks and looking at the market are very concerned that the Chinese economy will go south because of this. And when you shut down whole industries, tourism, travel, the various industries associated with it, it's going to have a profound effect on the Chinese economy, and that will hurt the world. So that's what they're all worried about.